Hey, Jigna.
Hi,
It's
Jennifer.
that time again. Are you ready for another episode?
Yeah, I'm so stoked today. This is one I've been waiting for a very long time because we really don't have these individuals in our lives on a regular basis, and we have so many questions for them, right? So we're here to ask all the questions you guys have, and we have Harry Jones. He is a top attorney, and I'm so excited to speak with him. He's focused on unemployment and employment law specifically. So we're going to be asking a lot of those questions that you've been dying to ask an attorney yourself, and may not have the means to do it. So we're here for you today, and we'll be asking all the interesting and get some interesting tidbits from Harry because he's had an interesting career for sure.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to meet him. So let's not delay and let's get to it. You ready? All
Yes.
right, let's get to talking to Harry.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Harry, for joining us. We are super excited to speak with you. We have like a million questions for you because, being laid off and all our listeners are laid off, and not everyone, but quite a few of them. There's a lot of legal questions we have. So we really appreciate you joining us. And we're just going to go ahead and get started. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Harry, and a little bit about your background.
Sure. I'm happy to be a part of this podcast, although I'm a little bit worried that I might have been part of some of your layoffs. I might have been the guy behind the layoff. No, I grew up in Cape Town, South Africa. I was born in New York City. My father was a chemical engineer, my mother a piano teacher. And I've always wondered if a lawyer is a sort of a perfect combination of those two things, the music and the science,
Yeah.
because I think it's very difficult to practice law for a long time, like I have, and not kind of lose your mind. So it tells me that there's something wrong with my mind, maybe that I can adapt. But
Just say there's
generally,
a lot of dissonance going on, right, between the music and science there.
right, yeah. But I'm mindful that music has a lot of math in it, so possibly it's a good combination. But and I've been in Dallas since the early '90s. Been an employment lawyer that whole time, and board certified in labor and employment law. And I currently practice in the world's largest employment law firm. So we are in every country that you have employees. We're in every state, and we have about 1,600 lawyers. And so now I'm a senior shareholder there, and we just basically help employers actually navigate through all of these issues, including layoffs.
So you've been really busy this year.
This has been a crazily busy year, and so normally you steep yourself in a topic, right? You're a privacy law lawyer for employers, and so you know everything there is about data in EU and Australia and Singapore, and it takes you 17 years to get to that point. This year, we all had to be pseudo experts. You know, how do you reopen a packing plant? How do you reopen a racetrack in New Jersey? How do you re-exit? And in what ways can you avail yourself of federal help? None of these things are really a practice area in law. A year ago you wouldn't have found that person.
I can't imagine being, what do you call it when the lawyers just start, like with the firm, they're like what do you
A
call
baby
them?
lawyer.
Well, but they have like I don't know, I've seen it like on Suits. What do they call them? I don't know.
So they're associates.
Associates or whatever. Yeah, I'd hate to be so like at that level right now because I can't imagine like as the senior attorneys come by and drop like all this stuff.
Right.
Like, hey, go read this.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's layers, right? So usually you want to know about what the federal law is. Now it's like I represent a university in San Francisco. What does the city say, the county say, the state say, and the federal government say? And all of them are dramatically different. And then, oh, by the way, Department of Education will plop something else on you.
Oh, so I know, as Jigga said, we have a lot of questions, but before we get started with those questions, I suspect you have a legal disclaimer for us.
Yeah, so anything that I'm talking about here has a little bit of a hypothetical nature to it, and I think that might be readily apparent. But to the extent someone out there in the world hears something and takes some sort of concrete legal action on the basis of this, I want you to know I am not your lawyer. I am not rendering you advice. I am telling you things that have general principle value. And so that's my disclaimer.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
so don't take anything that Harry says to heart. Just listen up, learn something, and then contact your own lawyer and get your own legal advice, I guess. But we're here to give us some legal advice and some anecdotes and other insights. But I think all of us can be more educated when it comes to some of the legalities of employment and unemployment. So before we jump into some of our questions, Harry, I want to legitimize you a little bit. Tell us a little bit about some of the cases you've fought. I mean, you've gone to the Supreme Court, right?
I have, yes. And I think I've been a little bit lucky, right? I'm a boy that grew up in Cape Town during the dying days of apartheid, right? So what was the issue fresh on my mind back then? Discrimination. It was my fighting topic. I got up every day trying to try to figure out a way to expand that. And so now, flash forward 25 years after that, I was literally arguing in front of the Supreme Court of the United States about a discrimination issue. And so, yeah, I always count my lucky stars. A lot of the cases have to do with solving problems that had involved unions. So I've had the premier cases about union vandalism and violence against trucking companies, and I've actually litigated union campaigns from all over the world. I've handled increasingly scandals and investigations. So your typical thing is a CFO makes off with $2 million and is on the run, and you've got to stop him and get the money back, and you've got to figure out how to do that. You could have a case involving a CEO that has literally done every single thing wrong under the code of ethics of the company. And so that's the kind of thing I get involved in now. But in my early days, it was just discrimination cases and disability cases and all kinds of bias cases. And I always felt like it was an interesting journey for, a guy like me to come from my background.
Yeah. Who were some of the justices up there in the Supreme Court?
Oh, so at the time I was Rehnquist, and the scary part for my whole argument, that what made it scary was, so you have to file to get into the Supreme Court sort of jurisprudence to be accepted. It's a separate deal. You're already in California, Texas, New York. Now you have to get admitted to that bar, and so you have to say everything bad you ever did. So, it's possible that when I was in college, I might have been involved in a little bit of a bar fight. I literally had to explain.
Allegedly?
Yeah. I mean, turning tables. I don't know. Maybe I was just having fun. But I had to literally explain that to Chief Justice Rehnquist. And it was just absurd. And the funny thing was that it made everyone laugh, my story. And so I was less nervous. But
I believe they all went to college at one point, so they could imagine what that scenario was probably like, right?
And the curtains, the majesty, the aura it takes your breath away.
Does it?
And I remember there was one question I was asked, and I literally said, I didn't know the answer, and I said, happily, Judge, we are not faced with that exact question here today. And I forgot who it was, but they said, well, actually, you are faced with that question today. But I just bought myself some time to come up with a better answer. So
awesome. I have to laugh. What you made me think of, and it's only because before this call I did Girl Scout cookie training. So the good news for everyone's listening, yes, Girl Scout cookies will be sold this year or going into 2021. But it made me think about that when you're saying someone ran off with money, like would you go after? We had a troop leader. There's an example that one year this troop that she took $10,000 of Girl Scout cookie money and disappeared. Right? I'm like, yeah, that's not cool. Don't do it. But yeah. So it made me think about this. It could happen anywhere. You could be chasing off a scout leader who took cookie money. I don't know.
Also, not enough money to start a new life in Tahiti.
I know, that's what I'm thinking.
10K is not going to get you very far, not anymore, at least.
Right. Yeah.
I'd rather take the 10K worth of cookies and go sit in the corner and eat them, but Yeah,
and Jigna knows this. I actually serve on the board of some nonprofits, and one of the worst cases I had was a CFO stealing money from a nonprofit, and he really did get enough to run and buy a boat in New Orleans and disappear. But we actually caught him, and the funniest part about that was I was talking to his ex-wife at 3 a.m, trying to figure out where he would go, what he would do, and she said, when it's all shut down, he'll go to the Johnny Cash Museum in Memphis. And that's exactly where he was.
It's so interesting that she knows that, first of all. You know, and the fact that he chose that specific location to be, it's interesting. I mean, obviously he must be an amazing, like just a diehard fan of Johnny Cash that, you know, he could give up his entire life.
Yeah, we all have our patterns. And one thing I've learned, and we'll probably weave this into our discussion as we go, is in every kind of employment law issue, it does come back to that. At some point, you get into patterns, whether it's your performance or it's when someone's done something, you know, some misconduct. They will tend to keep repeating certain behaviors.
People who have patterns and are going to be doing similar things. And is that one of the identifiers for employers in terms of who they're going to want to let go or furlough or even fire? Like, what are the employers sort of thinking about when they're having to make these tough decisions?
Yeah, so it's going to matter a lot on the scale. So our firm represents the biggest, you know, Apple, Exxon, American Airlines kind of clients, but we also have, I don't know, the quintessential doctor's office where you have maybe 25 people. That's a whole different ballgame, right? So in a larger sense, if you're talking about the multinationals, you have an HR department, you've got 360 reviews, you've got a lot of benchmarking and metrics. So when it comes time to layoff, and by that I mean where there's not really misconduct at issue so much as just an economic decision, then you can slice and dice those pretty quickly. And those lists come up. Now, then we will run some analysis on them to see if there's, you know, variations that would flag it. So you've got way too many women or people over 40 or so and so forth. But in a medium-sized employer or even the smallest ones, it's a lot more often about, you know, personality, their performance on a long scale, not necessarily this year. And so in those cases, you know, what you've done before, your patterns, your reputation can put you in the group that you wouldn't want to be in. But I do think when you're in a larger corporation setting, it's pretty much by the numbers. And there's a lot of fail-safe methods to make sure they're not accused of discrimination. So they go the extra mile. Also, when you're in a big layoff with a big company, you usually have severance packages that are submitted, that are given to you, and they have to, by law, give you a list of the people who were included or not included by certain risk factors. You're not likely to get severance packages from a small employer, and that should factor in sometimes when you're picking an employer, by the way, you know, if that's important to you. As far as, you know, what I'll call more for cause terminations, then it's usually not that much of a surprise if you were reading the signals. To Jigna's point, you were talking about reading. I think you do get signals, right? You get, you've got too many visits with HR. You've got the classic PIP, performance improvement plan, which is, you know, a lot of times the kiss of death. It's very difficult to emerge from a PIP. A lot of times a PIP says immediate improvement and sustained improvement and continual improvement is expected. What does that mean? Can you have any bad day at the office after that? Usually not. So yeah, these are ways where I think you can tell you're going down that road.
So should we just assume that if I'm getting a PIP, maybe I should start looking for another job just to be sure? That's sort of a way for employers to gently kind of nudge you out of the team or the company.
Yeah, it's definitely not a good sign. And well, in general, I would say that if you're on the ascent part of your career, you should be looking all the time anyway. Mm-hmm. Salary.
That's a big thing, right? Keep looking, even if you have a job. Like, hello, that's one thing I never really learned. I didn't learn for a very, very long time. And I really want to stress that what you're saying, Harry, is like, you have to continue looking, especially if you're 10 years at least into your career.
Right. And also the smell of desperation is on you sometimes when you've been out too long. Yeah. And so even if you're inside a company and it's just time to negotiate a better salary, you're just more likely to get a better negotiation going if you have another offer on the side. You know, you just go in with a little more boldness. But definitely when you're in a PIP situation, what's happened behind the scenes is someone has said, well, let's fire her. Another person has said, no, I don't think so yet. That's all. It's the yet.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. You're definitely on track. You're in the red list. You have the red file. You have the red folder. Now, some things you can do that can successfully emerge from a PIP are sort of startingly dramatic improvements, but then holding it. A better communication chain. Just make sure that you're doing a different way of communicating because something in your communication has landed you in this situation. So sometimes it's that you have gatekeepers that are the only ones forming their impression of you. Well, you need different gatekeepers,
Yep. Yep.
different mentors, a whole different field of vision so that someone in the top level can look down and say, well, actually, that's a different look. This employee A, this employee number 4, has actually shown me something different.
Well, I feel like it's always never a good sign when someone says, especially as your supervisor or director or manager of someone, they say, I don't know what so-and-so does on your team. I understand they do a really good job, but I don't know what they do.
Right.
So if you ever hear that, like you really need to make yourself visible and known. Like that was, I had some, in a couple jobs ago, a colleague on my team that was one of the things. And we were like, well, she's really essential. She does all these great things. And it was like, how do we make her more visible and get that up the chain to understand? And I think sometimes that's a hard thing because I think the whole team would like have freaked out if there had been that position had been eliminated or something. We'd be like, no, like
Right.
even though they're in the background, like, no, they really are important. So it was how to get that in front of other people too.
Right. And I think one error we all make is we assume that something dramatic has to happen for us to be fired or laid off, right? In reality, most of us, I'm not sure where your audience is, where they are in every state, but for the most part, with some notable exceptions, we're all swimming in the ocean of at will, you know? We're seeking an island, and the island could be an age or gender or religion, but the fact is most terminations don't involve that. And you could literally say something as bizarre as, I'm firing you because you're bald, Harry. There is no island for me to jump on. I just, that's it. So at-will employment is devastating if you're thinking something dramatic has to happen. The truth is, it's a gentle slide for the most part. People get fired for an accumulation of things that slip below expectations. And it's just always a competition. So exceptions would be like teachers, firefighters, police. They have actual contracts, college football coaches. But most of us are actually just at-will employees our whole career.
So I want to ask you, in Jigna and I's case, I will tell you, because I was Jigna's boss, she had a high performance review. I had a high performance review, like we were given, both told high. And in our situation, when we were like, it was really clearly, it was more like the jobs were going away because we did live events. And so this was kind of I think we kind of all knew underneath, like it was coming because we were unwinding like contracts from hotels and speakers. And you see like, okay, as I delete all of them, who's coming next, right? So it's a different feeling. And I suspect there's a lot of other people who are in that place too, like us, and especially in the hospitality and entertainment business, where jobs went away because for at least the next year, people aren't going to do those things.
Yeah. I will say, one thing I will add to that is, before you ask your question, Jennifer, is I actually experienced two different sides of that, right? During 2008, when there was this big recession, I was with a company, Fortune 500 company, where there weren't events happening because there was no money to hold those events. But that company did such a great job at retaining us and seeing value in us and sort of distributing us in different areas and different projects to sort of keep us there. And then we were in this other company that was much smaller association, didn't have a lot of monies to really devote to it, to where we kind of all knew at the back of our mind, we were hoping, for the best, but we were going to get let go. It was just a matter of time. So I've sort of seen both sides of it. And that's sort of what confused me quite a bit for this time around, because there's this big hope that, well, it didn't happen to me before. Maybe it won't happen to me again. But that you kind of have to sit back and think about like the type of company you're with, association, what exactly should you be thinking about?
Yeah, and I think constant reinvention of ourselves. I mean, perhaps we all learned something this year about not taking things for granted. So traditionally, in law, for instance, people that were in mergers and acquisitions who basically charge a percentage fee on these giant mergers and acquisitions kind of were just rolling along for this whole century. I mean, from 2000 on, it's been kind of a merry ride. And that came screeching to a halt. Similarly, there were people involved in what I'll call garden variety family law cases where you have to go to court, like it has to be a court. And they were slow on reorganizing courts because everyone kept thinking, oh, it's about to change, so let's not be Zoom court. So my particular field, nothing happened at all. I mean, if anything, we are more busy and more in demand because we were the ones that could give that advice. And I was thinking, what could I have known 10 years ago that would point me to that? And so, what I did think about 10 years ago was investigations never die. People always steal. There's always going to be lust and greed and avarice and flawed human nature. So what can I do to address that? And am I good at it? Because your clients know better than you what you're good at. You know, at the end of it all, you realize your clients know what you can do. And so don't fight it. Don't have too much inflexibility. Start thinking about, what have I gotten really good praise over? What have people really appreciated me for? Take it seriously when people compliment us. I don't know if you might be like me, Jennifer and Jigna, but I'm uncomfortable with getting too much flattery and praise, but that's actually valuable feedback too.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, no, bring it on. I'm good with it.
No, Jennifer's just fine. She flatters herself all the time. We're good there.
Yeah. Sometimes people are like, don't encourage it.
Right. But it probably matters who's doing the praising. So like,
it doesn't matter. Like, I'll take it.
Wise people who have been in the industry a long time, they know things, and it's very valuable to hear what they think you could branch out into. Or when they say, have you ever considered such and such? And you go, oh, I don't do that. Try it maybe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So
good point.
What about, I know you said severance packages, like you may get them with big companies, you may not get them with smaller, there are smaller companies I know that give them too. Well, let's say you do get a severance package and they normally come with this contract with it of some sort, it looks like, right? And they're like, you have 3 days or 5, whatever it says, to like review it and sign it and return it. Like, should you go talk to an attorney? I mean, if it's for like a couple $1,000, should you just go with it? If you're talking big money, maybe, I don't know what big money means, different things to different people. So I don't know, like when does that come in play and what should you be looking for on it?
Shameless plug, everyone should have an attorney. You should consult with your attorney. You should be friends with an attorney. You should find a relationship with an attorney that is not so forbidding that you couldn't send in a contract over and just say, quick look, anything exotic in here? For the most part, those severances are very cookie cutter. There's not much you can do differently in them except in California. There are some special rules. But for the most part, it's buying your silence. It's buying your release. It's saying, I won't sue you. It's not that they particularly fear a lawsuit. They might in your individual case, but most of the time they just want to have an entire group. These 30 people from this department are now moving out, and we've validated it with a cost, and they're signing this release. The things to look out for are non-competes, for example. So in some states, you can impose a non-compete at the end of your employment. It sounds a little crazy, right? In some states, you can't. Some states, you have to have had that already in place. There also could be some non-disclosure language in there that's been affected by Me Too. So the Me Too movement didn't do a whole lot to change the underlying fundamentals of a harassment case. What they did is made it harder to buy a gag order. I mean, like people couldn't just say, hush money, go away forever. It's possible in some states, for example, Massachusetts, where you could actually sign something and not be bound by it, that particular part. Also, it expanded the time period in which you could make the claim in some cases, if it was more of a sexual assault and less of verbal conduct. So those kind of things, if you had something happen to you, don't just sign something for $3,000 or $8,000. If the thing that happened to you has, gravity and material weight, and you also not necessarily operating just for yourself, but also for future people or people that haven't got your voice. But in general, there's not much wiggle room. you can go back to the company and you can say, I'd love to take your offer, but I need 7 more weeks or 5 more weeks. No one's going to yell at you. They just might say, no, we're going to keep it the way it is. Or they might say yes, in which case you just spent the most valuable 5 seconds of your life by just saying, I would like more.
And is there opportunity for negotiations on some of those service packages?
So here's what they don't want to do. They don't want to have 17 different versions. So they're unlikely to do that with most. But so there are situations that are just different. So you get to look at, why am I different? Well, I moved across country on the basis of a promise to go from Florida to California, and I took my daughter out of school and changed my life. Maybe I'm a different exemplar than the rest in this layoff. Or like I was a whistleblower. I just complained about the numbers being fraudulent or fake. Then I'm a different person. So to buy my release, you might have to pay me more. But it's those are negotiable. I mean, I would say the language itself is hard to bend. They're not going to want to change the release, no matter how forbidding it seems. It's just.
What about when it says something like you lose your right to free speech? Like, can they really do that? Say that? Like, that seems like a bogus line to me.
Well, that's literally what they're buying. If free speech includes filing something in court and making that claim, right?
So it's just specific to that contract. Like, you're not saying I can't have free speech about anything else.
Yeah.
Sometimes it seems kind of vague in there, and I looked at it and I'm like, look at that and I'm like, really? What does that really mean?
It's more about disparagement. So I take the deal, I take your $18,000, walk in the sunset, and then I immediately go on and post everywhere that you're the worst company that ever existed and you cheat your employees. You're probably going to get a call from a guy like me. So, yeah, there's also a timing issue there. If people will wait a while, and they just join the general ethosphere about commentary, it's different. But, yeah, for sure, they want you to be quiet and not disparage. What's interesting, though, is you can sometimes make that mutual. So in a smaller company, for example, there's an ability to say it's mutual. It's kind of hard to bind American Airlines or something like that, because they can't control 1,000 employees. But a small doctor's office, my example, yeah, I mean, sure, both sides kind of want to just move past it and not really hear from each other very much. Another area of negotiation you can do is on how much they will extol your greatness. If someone calls, what are you going to say? So you can have a scripted response saying, Jennifer worked from X date to Y date and rendered valuable services. Even if they were not too pleased with you at the end, they don't usually mind saying something kind of like that.
Right.
That's actually really good.
Yeah.
Really good information to have is, because you're always afraid of what's going to be said of you after you depart, right? And what they're allowed to say, even, I believe some companies are just have a standard response. This person worked here, they didn't, and that's it. And they don't go any further into it. But others may be sharing additional information.
Yeah, and it's important to know on that companies actually have more freedom to say what they want to say than they might want to tell you they do. I mean, in most states, there's protection for just following their personnel file, for example. They don't have to be right on what happened. They just have to believe that they're right. So, they can say what they want to say. For example, if someone's eligible for rehire, that says a lot. Or even saying we wish her the best in her future endeavors. That sounds like an amicable separation.
That's really good. I think that's one big takeaway is anything you want to negotiate on your severance package or your contract. That's one major thing I think that any employer would be open to negotiating with.
Yeah, it doesn't cost them any money.
No.
You can actually attach it as Exhibit A to an agreement, and so it's an actual written letter signed in real ink, and that goes a long way. You could have 10 copies or something. And that way, when you're walking in the door to next employer, that solves the prior employer issue.
That's great.
Harry, okay. Now, we talk about these severance packages, these contracts, like you get some money. big or little, can you apply for unemployment if you still get a severance package?
So if the package doesn't speak about it at all, then you're perfectly able to do that. But often the severance packages will address it. And it also, we talked about negotiation points. You can say, will you agree not to contest it? And literally you file it and you know it's a lay down, it's a slam dunk, and you're going to get it. I think most employers are welcoming that because, again, it's not cash out of their pocket. It's a chargeback to their insurance rate, which they don't even feel, actually. It's not real money coming out of their pocket. And it affects their ratio later. So it's actually a nice, soft negotiation point. There are situations where you think if I bring it up, they might want to contest it. So in that case, silence in the agreement itself actually is fine for you.
Perfect. That's good to know, because I know I was wondering at first about like, okay, what happens, if they give me some money, do I get unemployment? Am I going to get screwed if I take money and get, it was like,
But don't some states, don't they, I believe that happened to me in terms of severance package. I got about a month of severance and my unemployment didn't start until after that month. Maybe because my employer contested it. I'm not quite sure. What do you think that might be? The reason might be.
Yeah, it matters how that additional compensation is coded or classified.
Okay.
So, for example, you can code it as sort of a settlement money, and then it's just money that comes out of nowhere. Or if it's continued payments of your actual pay, then it looks like you're still really an employee until that runs out, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Perfect. Good to know. So, okay. Unemployment. A lot of people who got laid off like in that March, April timeframe, they're coming to the end of their 26 weeks. With that CARES Act, there's additional 13 weeks of pay, I understand, to the end of the year.
Right.
How do you know if you get it? Do you have to reapply? What happens? What do you need to do or think about? How do you find out?
So you do have to apply. Some states have made that almost automatic. I think California and New York have made it where it's almost part of your weekly check-in on your state unemployment. And so it directs you right to the pandemic emergency unemployment compensation portal. But if you're in most of the rest of the country, you're getting to your end of 26 weeks, or in some states, 40 weeks, whatever it is, your cutoff, then you want to go for your extra 13 weeks of whatever, $300 a week or something. You have to actually qualify again. Now, the standards are supposed to be just the same, and most state systems basically have a breakdown of good cause or not, for cause or not, which has generally been litigated over and over for 100 years, and it has to do with, it's not about not doing a good job, it's whether you refuse to do a good job, or you have like defiance or insubordination versus I'm doing my job, it's not great, and I get laid off, right? So you should qualify under that.
Or the pandemic comes along and just makes your job go away.
Right. So there have been some reports, though, on the PEUC that there have been there's a greater rate of rejection. I don't know what that is. We're still trying to figure out whether that's true or not, or if it's anecdotal. But it looks like there are some people saying, I qualified under Missouri or Louisiana or Texas, and now I'm not qualified. What gives? And no one has a good answer right now.
It seems to be like the state of the world at the moment.
So here's another technicality I had a question on. So let's say, for example, you've been unemployed for the last month, and the sort of the federal benefits had run out, right? The relief hasn't, but they were talking about backdating it from the last time the benefits were given.
Right.
But in the interim, you did find a job. So do you still qualify for those weeks or months that you didn't get paid, were unemployed, or are you just SOL now?
So in every scenario, the technical rule is that once you're gainfully employed, it shuts off your ability to get new unemployment dollars. The practical impact is once it's flowing already and you get a job, it's very difficult for anyone to know exactly when the start point is, but it's possible that someone would actually do that audit. I would say that right now, no one's really in the mood to do that. to actually go back and say, give me $47 back, the overlap. So yeah, and anyway, everyone should be applying as much as they can for the benefits that are out there, because we don't know how long they'll be. We don't know what the negotiations will look like. We don't know when the funds run out. It's very much like the PPP for employers is, it rewarded whoever got there first.
Okay, so even if you feel you may not qualify, just try anyway.
It sounds like a good idea, Okay, so I'm an employer's lawyer, so I'm not, cheerleading for everyone to get every last dollar from everything. But I just think that in this particular situation where we are now, there's a little bit of just compassion in order, and there's it's desperate times for everyone. So if there is a federal program, definitely look into it, but you're going to have to actually reapply it.
Now let's go ahead and go into a little bit more about just unfair treatment by the employers. And I'm sure you have some interesting stories. So I want to kind of start there before I ask more questions about it. But tell us just some of the outrageous stories that you might have kind of come across or had to fight, on both sides, really, on the employer side as well as the employee side.
Yeah. So I've only been on the employer side my whole career.
Okay.
Because I found that they just, paid more regularly. But yeah, so there's been amazing evolution, right? So when I first started practice of law, we always fought about disability. People hid in bushes trying to prove that the guy who said his back was hurt was playing golf. And so you'd have these like bird dog detectives would go out there. And the funniest one I saw, I don't know if it's funny or not, actually, it might be kind of almost sad, but it was a guy who actually had slaughtered a cow and was literally able to pick up a cow, but was claiming that he was disabled from work, in a factory, unable to move a wooden beam, but he was literally seen picking up the better part of a cow.
Like an entire heifer, like out.
Yeah, we couldn't believe it. Like it was like the strongest human being in North Texas. Like
an heifer,
he should be on the ESPN Strongest Man contest. But he was literally at work acting like he couldn't pick up a 20-pound piece of plywood.
What I want to know is really, my mind wants to know why he's out in the field slaughtering his cow, like.
Rancher.
There's a lot of stuff going on there.
We had a case one time where it was a person who said I was fired and it was discrimination, racial discrimination. And he said, I'm a Japanese American. And nobody in the whole world had ever known that he was in any way Japanese American. I mean, literally, name, appearance, personal backstory, like no one knew. And we literally were kind of gingerly, sensitively trying to figure this out. Like, so on what basis are you Japanese American? And we really never had a good answer. And it turned out he was literally almost kind of a delusional person. And he just invented a story for himself. Mike Brown, part Japanese.
Maybe he just really liked Japanese culture.
He's kind of like Emma Stone in that movie Aloha. Remember that she got a lot of flack for that.
Right. It was almost like a Seinfeld episode. I was like, I mean, I hate to ask this question, but it's almost like the important part of this case. Before we go any further, are you really in any way a Japanese? The answer was really not.
I'm imagining Elaine and that guy she was dating, the one she thought was like African American.
Yes.
And he thought she was Hispanic because her last name was Benice. But she's like, it's Venice. Like they had this. Yeah.
We both thought the other was a minority.
Right.
But there have been more other examples of that on Seinfeld. If you guys remember, there was a guy named Pinter. She thought his name was Peter.
Oh, that's right.
He was actually Indian. His name was Pinter. So, and his arch nemesis was marrying him, and Sue Ellen Mischke.
That's right.
Yeah.
We appreciate you bringing up Seinfeld. That's our favorite show. So.
You might have encyclopedic knowledge of Seinfeld. One of my associates does, actually. She can literally say the season and episode.
Wow.
Oh, bring her. Let's get together over drinks around that one because
she's amazing.
I watched Seinfeld while I was giving birth to my first child. That was my way of staying calm when I was in labor.
Is your firstborn named Kramer or what?
No, he's named Kyle after the Texas A&M, the football field. But yeah,
right. Yeah, so it's like it's never a dull moment. You have people that. First of all, it's even when you're litigating a case and you think you have a good witness or something, people just never testify the way you think they're gonna testify. So those are some of the funniest stories of someone literally telling you for 5 hours a certain thing, getting up there and absolutely changing everything, and you feel like you're in opposite like what happened? Where did this go wrong? And in trial law, it's all about sort of kind of bouncing around and rolling with the punches. But I remember I had a case one time where someone was it was an actually intellectual property case, and I couldn't find a way to crack this person's story. They were claiming that our company had violated her patent, and it was a hair tool, and she said that she had invented it by being laid off. So it's a laid off story. She was laid off from a major company, and during that time, she went to a movie with her mother, and she saw a girl with a straw from the big gulp kind of drink, and was doing it through the back of her hair and creating an amazing French braid using the loop of a straw. And she thought, what if I make that into molded plastic and put a name on it, and we'll sell it around the world? Well, she did, and it made $10 million in 1 year, and it was a sort of shown on TV kind of product. And then she was suing my company. And so I said to her, tell me again where you got that idea. And she said, from the straw, that story. And I said, what about with horses? I grew up in horse country. And I remember the grooms, and they took those big loops, and they would go through the tail of the horses and make a beautiful pattern for dressage. And I remember being hypnotized and mesmerized by that big loop going through the horse's tail. And I kept telling the story just to make her upset. And at some point she said, I don't even like horses. We're in Texas. We had 2 people on the jury that were cowboys for real. They kind of woke up and said, well, okay, then you're done. So trial law is so funny because people decide things on the basis of that. It's a $40 million case about intellectual property, and she said, I don't like horses. So, yeah.
Wow.
I've never been selected for jury. Have you, Jigna?
What now?
Have you ever been selected for jury?
You know what? I haven't been called for jury duty for a very, very long time, but the few times that I was called, I had an excuse this is like all the way back in college is the last time I think I was ever called for jury duty. So I never really had to go in. But I kind of want to be honest. I have this secret desire to be selected as a jury member just so I can figure out the process.
If you want to be selected, Jigna, you have to not be as animated as you sometimes are.
I know.
You want to be kind of the nothing burger juror who like sits there and kind of doesn't do much, because then you'll get overlooked and no one will think to strike you.
Well,
so yeah.
I once went for a whole day of this stuff, and it's like after 5 o'clock even now, and they pull us in and they start calling the jurors in to sit down. Turns out the attorneys couldn't count, and as I was coming in, I was the last one, and all 12 seats were taken. And I looked at the judge. I said, Your Honor, are we doing a baker's dozen? And he said, No, Miss Crowfoot, you're excused. And I was like,
That's great.
Baker's dozen. That's interesting.
I was good luck with your attorneys now that they can't count. I'm like.
So what kind of case would you like to be on as a juror?
Who are you asking, me or Jennifer?
Yeah, well, Jigna, you said you want to be on the jury.
I don't know. I think I want to be on something pretty, something that's a big headline, right? Something that's going to introduce me in every aspect of the judicial system, or sort of the trial system, I guess. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but what you see is what you see on TV, or what is what you see on TV. And I don't know if that's the reality, or how much of it is reality. So it's more the curiosity. I mean, that's in my name, right? My name means curiosity. So I have that sort of desire to just want to learn more and understand. So yeah, I mean, one day maybe I will be selected, who knows? But then I don't know if I want to do a 5-day don't talk to your family type of seclusion.
Or it could be longer. Yeah.
Well, people like murder mystery cases, but I will say employment law, you're not that disappointed, because our cases are usually about sex and stealing. So it's like money or sex, basically. So usually it's kind of high entertainment value. And
that would be high entertainment value.
Investigator in the Fab Five, which is the Texas cheerleader case, which was turned into a movie with Tatum O'Neal. And there's a guy playing me in the movie doing what I did, which is funny. It's just
No way. Okay.
Wow.
a very silly case.
Hold on. All right. Let's.
Okay.
What is Fab 5?
He's gonna IMDb this right now.
I'm IMDbing this right now. It's called
an
Fab
actual
5.
movie. It's an actual like Lifetime movie. It's very silly and funny.
Fab 5 with the Texas cheerleader. Scandal came out in 2008. All right. Who plays Harry Jones? Okay. Who plays you?
I'm not sure who the guy was.
Did they change your name in it? Like
They must have, yeah.
You have to look
He was
at
not nearly as good looking as I am, but
yeah, you didn't get to pick who plays you. Like that's what I would have been.
no.
like.
In fact, the person who wrote the movie was the fired cheerleader coach, and she wasn't too happy with me at the time, so she kind of did a poison casting. But later on, we became friends. She said, "I'm really sorry I got that guy to play you." And the big line in the movie is what I actually wrote in my report, which is adults will be adults. I mean, kids will be kids, but adults have to be adults.
Interesting. Now I don't see a lawyer investigate. I don't know who you would be. There's an investigator.
I mean, if you just say my name and do McKinney North cheerleader scandal or Harry Jones Fab 5, it'll come up. And there's my report will be actually come up usually.
That's so crazy. Like who knew you would like then have be a movie about a case you did? Like I guess it could happen again, right?
Yeah, I always thought like I had like meaningful cases of profound issues. I'm like, no, that's the one I'm known for. My cheerleader case, I literally wasn't allowed to have anyone else type even because it was so sort of top secret. I mean, bear in mind, I was on like Good Morning America. I was on Sean Hannity's show. I was on BBC. I went on a vacation with my daughter that year to Seattle to see a theater, intimate theater, and literally someone that's in the Seattle knew I was coming and they had me on their morning show.
Oh, wow.
Really impressed my daughter. But and so it turned into this big feeding frenzy of local TV, which then went national and international. And I was supposed to calm down the pom-pom moms, just come in and like restore order. And I had to literally do these interviews all about how the girls ran amok in the school.
It's like a reality show.
It was ridiculous, yeah. And I remember thinking like, wow, when I was in school, people like the parents pretended like they adhere to some sort of common moral code. And now it's like, no, whatever makes my daughter famous, I'm good with that.
So let's talk a little bit about, applying for jobs, right? That's the key goal for most folks that are unemployed or furloughs or folks who just may need another job and get out of the situation they might be in. Do you have any tips from an employer lawyer that, we should keep in mind when we are applying to jobs or looking at, let's say, offer letters?
Yeah, so this part is so important because employers, especially big ones, hire in waves. And what they were about 2 months ago is not what they're about today. And so, we've all heard the adage of looking for work is a job unto itself. And it's actually true. But what we do wrong sometimes is we make a big spreadsheet, we work it down, and we check things off. We actually need to have more of a cycle. Like I'm going to talk to Texas Industries every 2 months and refresh and change and adapt because they really don't mind. They don't mind you bugging them. And in fact, sometimes you get the job by bugging people. You literally have to realize that they're not put out by it. It's not offensive to them to have someone prove that they want in so badly that they do it every quarter. And sometimes you learn and adapt and make a different approach. But I wouldn't check things off and say, yeah, I looked at 200 employers, but I only had one touch with 200. I'd rather have 10 touches with 30 or 40 high quality targets. Next thing is there's just a way to make something look really sterile and boring. And there's a way to put your personality stamp on something. And most employers are looking at so many CVs and resumes that they kind of jump a lot of the academics because they can algorithm that out. I mean, there's a way to sort of like funnel that if you're using a service or a headhunter, there's a way to make that first funnel happen. And then it's going to be, wow, you are a beekeeper and you make honey, or you are someone who composes poems or something. There is a way to stand out where someone just wants to take the meeting just to ask you, how do you make your honey? And that sounds silly, but you have to personalize your approach or it's just too easy to flush it.
It's so funny you mentioned that, because there was someone who was in my team, at one of my previous jobs, who was actually a beekeeper, or she had this beehive thing in the back in her backyard. She and I actually just reconnected just about a month ago. So it's interesting that you say that, and I do still think about her and her bees. So it does stay with you. That's a really great point. And I will say one thing that's helped benefited me is putting this Laid Off Life podcast on my resume. It definitely at least starts the conversation.
Yeah, and also they could see, almost audition, how you express yourself and articulate it. Yeah, but I do think putting personal aspects in there is important. I even think you're just trying to catch an eye, but in not a silly way or flippant way, but something that makes the person wonder, well, what would it be like to work with that person? As far as the application process itself or interviews, I mean, a lot of those interviews come down to the part of the interview where they turn around and they say to you, and what questions do you have for us? If there's one area of the interview where people diverge the most, it's in that one. And if you don't want to be too venal about it, like say, how often will I get a pay raise? You're literally sending off a signal that they're going to be a nightmare, because you're going to be the first one knocking at the door every quarter saying, where's my raise? There are other questions you can ask that show an instinctive teammate, or how work gets assigned, or what are the ways in which I can branch out, or are there pathways to grow? Those kind of things impress someone as someone who actually wants to come be here and be a part of a team. So I would always have stock questions ready. I'd have a couple, two or three ready to go. I think it's very difficult to work in research that you've done on the company or the person and seem natural. It's like you're in an interview and you go, and well, Harry, that article you wrote in 1997 about governmental contracts was particularly meaningful to me. I'm not going to like that. I think that's ridiculous. I think, anyone who read that article is insane. So,
or they say the movie you were portrayed in, like.
That's okay, because that's funny. And especially if they say that person was ridiculous, or they were, it should have been like, had a more lighter heart. But like, that's pretty funny. But I think there's a way where you can overkill, where you sound like the biggest nerd in the world and you've read, your doctoral dissertation. And, it just seems a little strange. So I wouldn't try that hard.
There is that fine line, right? I do quite a bit of research about the company as well as the interviewer. Yeah. I go on LinkedIn. That's the first thing, but they're doing the same thing, right? We kind of know. But to your point, I try to, and I know others who try to just find ways to sort of tweak their questions to accommodate or, kind of go along with their career patterns that they've had, and maybe even find ways to learn from that, and find that connection.
So every employer has a sort of mad dream, which is, could I embed a test in my interview process that would weed out the crazies and the creeps and the loopy people that are driving me crazy for the next 20 years? And the truth is, there's not really such a
There's
test.
no fail-safe.
Thank you so much, Harry, for all the amazing questions and responses. And I don't even know what I'm saying anymore.
And the fun I just really to learn that you were in a movie.
I just really enjoy the fact portrayed. That you're in this amazing Tatum O'Neal movie with Jenna Devon Tatum, or she used to be Tatum.
I think, Harry, you're the first person I know that personally has been portrayed in a movie. Like,
yeah. So no, apart from that, really great insight, and I think I will definitely take away some great knowledge moving forward. If I am ever laid off again, I know what to negotiate and not to negotiate for sure. Let's hope that doesn't happen, but if it does, I'm armed with the good information. So, Harry, thank you so much. And that kind of takes us to our last segment, which is fortune cookie time. And what we do here at Laid Off Life is look at our fortunes, and we'll be sure to look at yours as well. So you, as our guest of honor, get to decide who goes first.
I go with Jennifer.
Right.
Okay. I always get the cheesy one, so we'll see. There we go. Cookie time. Courage comes through suffering.
So
Well, you're
Yeah.
probably pretty darn courageous right now, I would say.
All right. So who's next, Harry? You or Jigna? She's
Me.
gonna All right.
Harry.
You know, the best to left. Yeah.
Oh, okay. We have a theme here. Courage is the mastery of fear, not the absence of fear.
Ooh, that's because he's an
Very insightful.
attorney.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So courage, let's see what the third one is. Okay, this is mine.
It's gonna be courage is like art.
Dude, courage conquers all things. It even gives strength to the body. I kid you, this is a courage.
Let's be courageous.
Nice. So this was a lot of fun. Thank you again, Harry. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me. I really had a good time.
See, lawyers can be good people now. I know.
I have my days.
As long as you're on our side, we're good.
That's exactly.
So first, let me say the courage is ironic or eerie, or I don't know, that's good karma, or it's the Reiki on or something like that from where we've been at, like bringing it all together.
And we didn't choose this, right? Like it
No.
was not planned.
Yeah, it's just that we got 3 courage. Like I'm feeling good. Like I feel
Theme of the
like
day.
yeah.
Theme of the day.
So that was really good, and I think it kind of went along with some of the things he talked to us about having that notion of talking sooner than later if there's things going on. So I think that's things to do with courage and
Yeah. Be courageous. Yeah.
I learned a lot from him. So I wish I had known some of those things prior to being let go, but it's good to know now, and it's certainly things to think about as you look at other employers.
Hey, if I know anyone, if I have any friends who are going to be laid off, or if I, maybe I'll just, we'll need to share this information with people, because there are some great negotiation tips that we should all be aware of. And there's a lot more you can negotiate than you think. So I really enjoyed the conversation, and that little tidbit about him being portrayed in a movie
That's so
was
cool.
interesting.
I don't know anybody who's been portrayed in a movie. Like
I don't know either.
I actually know people who've been in movies, but I don't know anyone who's been portrayed in a movie.
Yeah. So that was really interesting. It's a trivia pursuit.
And then the fact that he's also gone to the Supreme Court. Like,
yeah.
I don't know anybody who's done that either. So
we do now.
Like double dividends. It was a really great conversation. I'm glad he took the time. So again, if you're listening, Harry, thank you.
Yes.
So yeah.
All right, guys, till next time, we will be back with more great episodes or more great topics. And until then, check us out online. You know where to find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter now. And of course, you can find all our episodes on YouTube. And want to know more, a little bit more about us and Fred, our new team member, go to LaidOffLife.co. That is LaidOffLife.co.
Perfect. All right, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Bye.